The first time I saw her, she stood under the scorching sun, her face glistening with sweat, her tray of bananas perfectly balanced on her head. Her eyes held a tired but determined look, the kind that spoke of endless struggles, yet she still managed to smile at every potential customer. Her name was Amaka. People passed by her, some buying, some haggling, some laughing behind her back. Illiterate banana seller, they mocked. She should go and learn a skill instead of roaming the streets. I watched from my car, parked a short distance away, as she handled rude customers with grace, standing tall despite the insults. There was something about her, something rare, something precious. I was a young entrepreneur, well-educated and financially comfortable, but I had never believed in judging people by their status. That day, as I stepped out of my car and approached her stall, I saw something different in Amaka. She wasn't just a banana seller, she was a woman with dignity, a woman with a story, and I wanted to know her story. "How much for one bunch?" I asked, my voice soft. She looked up at me, her brown eyes filled with curiosity and surprise. Maybe she wasn't used to men like me buying from her. 200 naira, sir, she replied, her voice carrying the melody of her Igbo accent. I smiled. "Give me 5 bunches. She hesitated. "Ah, Oga, na plenty be that o. I hope say you get change?" I chuckled. "I have change, don't worry." As she packed the bananas into a nylon bag, I noticed her hands, strong, calloused, hands that had known hardship. I wanted to ask about her life, but I knew it wasn't the right time. When I paid, she hesitated before taking the money, staring at it like she wasn't sure it was real. Then she looked up at me and smiled. A smile so pure, so genuine, it hit me in the chest like a wave. "Thank you, sir," she said sincerely. As I walked back to my car, I heard a group of boys laughing behind me. "Oga, you dey buy banana from illiterate? Abina love dey do you?" One of them mocked. I turned to look at them, my expression calm but firm. "You call her illiterate, but she is out here hustling while you stand there wasting your time. Who is truly ignorant?" They went silent. I drove off, but my mind stayed with her. I didn't know it yet, but that moment marked the beginning of something deep, something powerful, something that would change both our lives forever. I couldn't stop thinking about her. That night, as I sat in my well-furnished apartment, sipping a glass of juice, my mind drifted back to the young woman in the marketplace, Amaka, her strength, her resilience, the way she had smiled at me despite the mockery of others. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts, but there was no one I felt like talking to. No one who had captured my attention the way she did. I had met beautiful, sophisticated women, ladies with polished nails and fluent English, women who knew fine dining and luxury brands. Yet none of them had ever left a lasting impression on me. But Amaka, she was different. I wanted to know more about her. The next day I found myself driving back to the same market. I parked a little distance away and scanned the area. It didn't take long to spot her. She was in the same spot, carrying the same tray of bananas, her tired yet determined expression unchanged. She hadn't seen me yet, so I watched her for a while. A little boy, barefoot and covered in dust, ran to her, tugging at her dress. "Big sis, I'm hungry," he whined. Amaka looked down at him, concern washing over her face. "Chibuzo, you never chop?" she asked, kneeling to his level. The boy shook his head. She sighed, reached into her tray, and pulled out a ripe banana. "Take, chop this one. No worry, I go find something for night," she said, ruffling his hair. The boy grinned, grabbed the banana and ran off. I felt something stir inside me. She was struggling, yet she still had enough love to give. I took a deep breath and walked toward her. "Oga, you don't come again?" she asked with a playful smirk. I chuckled. "Yes, you sell the best bananas in town." She laughed, a rich, genuine sound. "I beg no wine me, Oga." "I'm serious," I said, smiling. "And stop calling me Oga. My name is Chinidu." She hesitated. "Okay, Oga Chenidu." I shook my head. "Just Chinidu." She looked at me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, Chinidu." I liked the way my name sounded when she said it. She handed me a bunch of bananas, but this time I didn't just buy and walk away. I stood there, watching her, my heart beating slightly faster. I didn't know why I was so drawn to her, but I was sure of one thing. This was just the beginning. I stood there, watching her, feeling something I couldn't explain. There was a quiet strength about her, the way she moved, the way she smiled despite everything. I wanted to know more. "Do you always sell here?" I asked, leaning against a wooden stool beside her. She gave me a side glance, her lips curving slightly. No, I sell inside Buckingham Palace. I burst into laughter. I hadn't expected that. Ah, Amaka, you get mouth, oh, I said, shaking my head. She grinned but didn't say anything. Instead, she continued arranging her bananas, her hands moving skillfully. I watched her for a while before asking, "That little boy from earlier? Is he your brother?" Her face changed slightly. A shadow passed over her features. "Yes," she said, her voice quieter now. "What about your parents?" She hesitated, her fingers tightening around a banana. "They died, years ago." My heart clenched. "I'm so sorry." She nodded, swallowing hard. "It's fine. Life must go on." There was something in her tone, something that spoke of years of pain, of struggles she had endured alone. I wanted to ask more, but I knew it wasn't the right time. Instead, I said, "You're strong." She looked up at me, surprised. "Me? Yes, you," I said firmly. "You're taking care of your little brother, working hard every day. That's strength." She blinked a few times as if no one had ever told her that before. Then she looked away, a small smile playing on her lips. "Thank you, Chinedu." My name. She had said it again, and for some reason, hearing it from her lips made my heart race. I didn't know when or how it happened, but Amaka became a part of my thoughts every day. I found myself drawn to the market, watching her from a distance before walking up to buy bananas I didn't even need. Each day I learned something new about her. She had dropped out of school after her parents' death. She worked from morning till night just to make sure her younger brother, Chibuzo, had food to eat. She had no one to rely on. No family, no support, just herself and the harsh reality of life. Yet, despite everything, she never begged. She never complained. She stood tall, facing each day with strength, and that made me admire her even more. One evening I stayed longer than usual at the market, talking to her. "Don't you ever rest?" I asked as she packed up for the day. She let out a small laugh. "Rest no day for poor man O." I frowned. "That's not true. You should take care of yourself too." She shrugged. "Na wetin I dey do now?" She lifted the tray of unsold bananas onto her head and picked up a smaller bag containing a few tubers of yam and gari. I stepped forward. "Let me carry that for you." She gave me a sharp look. "No, I beg. I fit carry am." I ignored her protests and took the bag from her hand. She hesitated, then sighed. "Oga Chinedu, I know one wahala o." I smiled. "Who go give you wahala? I beg, let's go." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. We walked together, leaving the market behind as the evening breeze cooled the air. For the first time I realized I had never asked where she lived. "Where is your house?" I asked. She pointed down a narrow, dusty road. "For there." We walked in silence until we reached a small, run-down compound with cracked walls and a rusty gate. She stopped at the entrance. "This is where you live?" I asked softly, looking around. She nodded. "Me and Chibuzo." I felt something tighten in my chest. She deserved better. She deserved the world. I wanted to say something, but before I could, the door burst open and a little boy ran out. "Big sis, you don't come!" "Chibuzo." Amaka's face lit up as she bent down to hug him. "See wetin I bring for you," she said, handing him one of the yams. The boy's eyes widened with joy. "Ah, thank you." I watched them, my heart full. I had seen wealth, I had seen luxury, but this moment, this love between a sister and her little brother, was the purest thing I had ever witnessed. And I knew, right there and then, I would do anything to protect it. Amaka turned to me, her eyes searching mine as Chibuzo hugged her waist tightly. "You don't reach," she said softly. "Thank you." I could tell she didn't want me to go any further. She was used to handling things on her own, and letting me into her world, even this little bit, was already a big step for her. But I wasn't ready to leave. I wanted to know more. I wanted to be a part of her life. I crouched down to Chibuzo's level and smiled. "How are you, little man?" He peeked at me shyly, his big, bright eyes filled with curiosity. "I dey fine, sir." I laughed. "Call me Chinedu." He looked up at his sister as if asking for permission. Amaka sighed and nodded, and he grinned. "Okay, Chinedu." "Good boy," I said, ruffling his hair. Amaka adjusted the tray on her head. "I go enter now." I hesitated before asking, "Can I come in?" Her eyes widened slightly. I could see the conflict in them. She wasn't sure if she should let me in or not. Then she sighed. "If you don't mind, say no fine, you fit come." I smiled. "I don't care how it looks." She opened the small wooden gate, and I stepped inside. The house was small, just a single room with a tiny kitchen space at the corner. The walls were bare, and the furniture was simple. One wooden bed, a plastic chair, and a small table with a kerosene lamp. There was no luxury, no comfort, but it was neat, and it felt like home. Amaka placed her tray down and turned to me. "Sit." I took the plastic chair while Chibuzo climbed onto the bed. "You live here alone with him?" I asked. She nodded as she started unpacking the small food items she had bought. "No, only two of us." My heart ached for her. I had grown up with both parents in a comfortable home, never knowing what it meant to struggle for food or shelter. But Amaka, she had faced life alone. She brought out a small pot and started preparing gari for Chibuzo. As she poured water into a cup and stirred, I noticed how careful she was, measuring everything to make sure it was enough. She was used to managing little. "You don't eat?" I asked. She shook her head. "I go chop later." I knew she was lying. She had given Chibuzo the last bit of food they had. I reached into my pocket, pulled out some Naira notes, and placed them on the table. "Buy something for yourself too." She froze. Her eyes moved from the money to my face. "I know they beg." "I know," I said gently. "This is not charity. I want to help." She stared at me for a long moment, then slowly picked up the money. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Something shifted between us at that moment, a silent understanding, a connection that neither of us could deny. I didn't just see an illiterate banana seller. I saw a strong, beautiful woman who had sacrificed everything for the people she loved. And I knew I was falling for her. As I drove home that night, my mind was restless. I had seen struggle before, but Amaka's reality was different. She wasn't just surviving. She was fighting every single day. I wanted to help her, but I knew she was too proud to accept pity, so I had to be smart about it. The next morning, I found myself at the market again. Amaka was already at her usual spot, arranging her bananas. She looked up, saw me, and shook her head with a small smile. "Oga Chinedu, you know they tire?" she teased. I chuckled. "No, it's not my fault to say your banana's sweet past any other one for this town." She laughed. "You and your talk." I bought some bananas again, even though I had barely touched the ones from yesterday. But this time I didn't leave immediately. "I need your help with something," I said, leaning slightly towards her. She raised a brow. "My help? With wetting?" I cleared my throat. "I'm starting a business project, and I need someone trustworthy to help me manage supplies and logistics." She frowned. "Which kind of business?" "Food distribution," I lied smoothly. "It involves buying fresh produce and selling them in bulk. You know this market better than I do, so I figured you'd be the best person for the job." She hesitated. "But I'm not going to school," I smiled. "You don't need school to know how to run things. You've been managing yourself and your brother for years. That's more experience than most people have." She looked down, thinking. I knew she wanted to say yes. She needed the opportunity, but pride was holding her back. "I go think about she finally said. I nodded. "No pressure, just let me know." She watched me as I walked away, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite define. Maybe curiosity, maybe hope. But deep down I knew this was just the beginning. I didn't see Amaka for the next 2 days. I wondered if she was avoiding me. Had I said something wrong? Had my offer offended her? I couldn't shake the thought of her from my mind, so on the 3rd day I drove to the market again. But her spot was empty. My chest tightened. Where was she? I approached an older woman selling vegetables nearby. "Mama, please, where is the girl that sells bananas here?" She squinted at me. "You mean Amaka?" "Yes," I nodded quickly. She sighed and pointed toward a different section of the market. "She day that side. She no to sell today." I thanked her and hurried in the direction she had pointed. When I found Amaka, she was sitting on a wooden bench under a shed, her tray of bananas barely touched. She looked tired. No, she looked defeated. "Amaka," I called softly. She looked up, her eyes dull. When she saw me, she managed a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You no buy banana today?" she asked weakly. I sat beside her. "Forget banana. What's wrong?" She sighed heavily, rubbing her forehead. "Chibuzo sick, fever no one go." My heart clenched. "Have you taken him to the hospital?" She shook her head. "Hospital no be for poor man." I frowned. "Amaka, don't say that. He needs a doctor." She looked away. "No money." I didn't think twice. "Let's go," I said, standing up. She blinked at me. Go where? The hospital. I'll take care of the bill. She immediately shook her head. No, Chinedu, I no fit take your money like that. I crouched in front of her, looking into her eyes. This is not about money. It's about Chibuzo. He needs help. Please let me do this. Her lips trembled as she swallowed hard. She was fighting an internal battle, pride versus desperation. Finally, she exhaled shakily and nodded. Okay. I helped her up, and we hurried toward my car. She had spent her whole life fighting alone, but not anymore. Not if I had anything to do with it. The drive to the hospital was quiet. Amaka sat in the front seat, her hands clasped tightly together, her eyes staring out the window. I could see the worry in her face. She had fought so many battles alone, learning to survive, taking care of Chibuzo, struggling with every sunrise and sunset. But this time she wasn't alone. This time I was here. At the hospital, the nurses attended to Chibuzo immediately. The doctor, an elderly man with glasses, examined him carefully before turning to us. He has a severe fever, likely caused by an infection, he said, but he'll be fine with proper treatment. I let out a sigh of relief. Amaka, on the other hand, remained stiff, her arms wrapped around herself. I could tell she was holding back tears. The doctor wrote down a prescription and handed it to me. Get these medications and he should recover quickly. I took the paper without hesitation. I'll get them now. Before Amaka could protest, I walked straight to the pharmacy. As I returned with the drugs, I saw her sitting beside Chibuzo's hospital bed, gently stroking his hair. She was whispering something to him, words only meant for a sister and her beloved brother. I stepped closer. She looked up, and for the first time I saw something break in her. Something deep, something raw. Tears filled her eyes. She quickly turned away, wiping them. I didn't even know how to thank you. I placed the medications on the table beside her. You don't have to. She shook her head, her voice trembling. People know they help person like me. No be because I fine, no be because I sabi talk, but you just they help me. I sat beside her, lowering my voice. Maybe it's because I see something special in you. She blinked, her lips parting slightly. Something no one else sees, I added. She swallowed hard, looking down at her hands. For the first time since I met Amaka, she looked vulnerable. And in that moment I realized something. I didn't just want to help her. I wanted to be part of her world. I wanted to be the man she could lean on, and I would do whatever it took to make her see that. The night passed slowly. Amaka didn't sleep. She sat beside Chibuzo's bed, watching over him like a guardian angel, her fingers lightly brushing his forehead from time to time. I stayed with her, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. At some point she turned to me and whispered, "You fit go house, Chinedu. I know one stress you." I shook my head. "I'm not leaving." She blinked, surprised. "But I want to be here," I interrupted gently. "With you." Her lips parted slightly as if my words had caught her off guard. Then for the first time she looked at me. Really looked at me. Not as a customer, not as a stranger, but as a man who cared about her. Her eyes softened, and she whispered, "Thank you." By morning, Chibuzo was much better. The fever had gone down, and he was awake, sitting up in bed and eating the bread and tea the nurses brought. I watched Amaka feed him, smiling as she playfully scolded him for eating too fast. She was beautiful, not just in appearance, but in the way she loved. She was fierce, protective, and selfless. I had never met anyone like her, and I knew I never would again. After Chibuzo was discharged, I drove them back home. When we arrived, Amaka turned to me, her expression unreadable. "I go pay you back," she said suddenly. I frowned. "For what?" "For everything," she whispered. "The hospital bill, the drugs." I sighed. "Amaka, I didn't do it for money." She swallowed. "I know, but I know one owe you." I studied her face. She was still trying to be strong, still trying to prove she didn't need anyone. But I wanted her to know she could need me, that she could trust me. I stepped closer. "You don't owe me anything," I said softly, "but if it makes you feel better, then just promise me one thing." She looked up. "Wetin, let me be part of your life." Her breath hitched. Her eyes widened slightly. She wasn't expecting that. She didn't know how to respond, and I didn't rush her. I just stood there, waiting for the walls she had built around herself to finally come down. Waiting for her to see what I had seen from the very first day, that she wasn't just a banana seller. She was a queen. She was a fighter, and she was the woman I was falling in love with. Amaka stared at me, Her lips slightly parted. She was struggling to process my words. I had just asked to be part of her life. Not out of pity. Not because I felt sorry for her, but because I saw something in her that no one else did. Because I cared. Because I was falling in love. She swallowed hard, her fingers clutching the edges of her wrapper. Chinedu, I now understand. I smiled gently. Yes, you do. Her eyes darted to Chibuzo, who was now standing at the doorway, watching us with innocent curiosity. I took a deep breath and continued. I know you've been doing this alone for so long, and I respect that. You are the strongest woman I've ever met. But Amaka, even the strongest people deserve love. Her breath hitched. Let me stand by you, I whispered. Let me help you carry the weight. Tears welled up in her eyes. I could see the war happening inside her. She had spent years building walls around her heart, walls that protected her, walls that kept her from believing in fairy tales. But I wasn't a fairy tale. I was real, and I wasn't going anywhere. She wiped her eyes quickly, shaking her head. I know Sabi love, Chinedu. I know get class. I know get big English. No market woman I be. I chuckled. And that's exactly why I want you. Because you are real. Because you are strong. Because you have a heart bigger than anyone I know. She blinked at me, stunned. And then, for the first time since I met Amaka, I saw something new in her eyes. Hope. She exhaled shakily. If I say yes, wedding go happen? I stepped closer, gently taking her hands in mine. We build something beautiful, I said softly. Together. A tear rolled down her cheek. She squeezed my hands, and then she nodded. A small, hesitant nod. But it was enough. It was the beginning of something new, the beginning of love, the beginning of forever. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more videos.